describe as right arm or left arm fast. Van Meekeren is that. And the other thing he brings is bounce. The two Ryans, as I like to call them, Ryan Cook and Ryan van Niekerk, alongside Heino Kuhn, that make up the three main coaches for the Dutch. Yeah, confirming, I don't think we're going to see Scotty Edwards this innings. So, big concern over the rest of his series. Imagine Wes Barassi is going to have to be, to give you an idea as to what Nepal would be. Let's say they end up 2 down. They need to be 75 at the 20 over marker to be ahead of Duckworth Lewis Stern. And as soon as we get to 20 overs in the settings, we'll have an official game. It looks like the sun is going to be gone for, well, quite a while here, Mel, and we might have a lengthy piece of overcast weather, and the wind seems to be getting stronger and stronger again. But O'Dowd is captaining, Edwards is off the field, and the information we have is he will not be out there again during this innings.
Well, that is a big blow. It really is. And might be a big blow for this series, this round of matches as well.
There's a great saying in football. I'm no football fan. I'm probably going to get the city wrong, but a great saying in football, it's all well and good doing it on the easy days, the cup final days at Wembley and the like. But can they do it on a cold Tuesday night in Preston or in Middlesbrough or whichever city the same? Today feels like that kind of day, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's it's all well and good making 100 on a flat deck at the Oval when the sun is streaming down and the bowlers are being overworked. Can you contribute on a day like today? This is when the going gets tough today.
Yeah, it's actually hard to convey watching at home, especially when you see the sun shining, just how difficult it is.
Brilliant length from Klein.
Oh, yes.
No idea how the sun is shining, because we just had a massive patch of clouds roll in. And I thought that was going to be that for probably a few hours. It'll disappear in about 5 minutes, I think.
Yeah, it's just one little break in the clouds that...
It's just about to go.
Yeah, it's right in the sun. But the wind has definitely picked up in the past 5 minutes as well. And up around 22, 23 miles an hour. Maybe a bit more than that, I think, actually. Heading up towards 30 miles an hour. Really ferocious winds.
Down the leg side, as Kroos does the fielding. Do see Lorenzo Mayer and Dean Munaswame walking around in shorts. The lunatics. What are they doing in shorts? I'm going to see if I can get an update on Scott Edwards. I'll come back to you.
Go do that. When I see people in shorts, I want to actually do them physical harm, because it's making me feel even colder. I just walked past us too. It should be illegal to have bear calves in this. Really is some of the most difficult conditions I have experienced, and that's just in the commentary tent. unbeaten. This has been a terrific over from Klein. Just bowling at good length. They've just put the brakes on things after it looked like Nepal were getting off to a reasonably brisk start. The introduction of Paul van Meekeren, combining with a very tidy Klein, has just slowed things down a touch. Nicely driven, but straight to the fielder. It's another good over from Klein, and at the end of 8, it's 33 for 1. What have you found out, Lenny?
Yeah, we've established that I thought it was a glute injury for Scotty Edwards. Appears to be something down in the hamstring. Hopefully not terminal in terms of his participation for the series. Don't think anyone's suggesting that, but we're highly unlikely to see him for the rest of this second innings. It means that Noah Kroos has got the gloves on, and it means that Max O'Dowd is captaining as Paul van Meekeren comes in for his second. Looks for that Yorker. Probably doesn't need to look for the Yorker, does he? It's going to be particularly to Sharkey, who's diminutive in stature, it's going to be the pace and the bounce that will cause a threat to him.
Maybe he was just trying to repeat the ball that was responsible for first wicket, coming in just the second ball of his first over. And, just getting the line slightly wrong. That wind really is picking up at the moment. My goodness.
Does go full again. One-handed pickup gone the wrong end. Oh, and if Teja Nidamanoru is thrown at the non-striker's end, he's going to have 2 stumps to aim at. He's remarkably gone for a backhanded flick to the keeper when all his momentum was going towards the stumps. Crazy piece of cricket. What a piece of fielding at first. Made good ground to his left, picked it up cleanly. Because Bim Sharkey had dropped his bat, he might even have had time to run it into the stumps. But instead he goes for a flick to that end, and, well, Bertel was always getting home. This one's carved away with real aplomb. Races to the rope for 4.
That pleasing the Nepal fans. You can see them out there, flags waving. The cold isn't bothering them. They've spent quite a bit of time with I like to say Nepal for fans, but they're just as much fans of Andrew Leonard as well.
Don't know about that now, but I know they love their cricket, and I love my cricket. Yeah, it was great. Probably, 200, maybe 220 in today, something like that. Met basically every one of them during the break. And the stories that they have for you in terms of the journeys that not just they've made to come to watch today, but the journeys they're taking in their life. I've met young students who are at university in Aberdeen and in Edinburgh. I've met fans who came on a train from Preston and Manchester and Birmingham. I met several fans who've driven from London, one of which drove overnight and hasn't been to bed yet, which I'm not sure how safe that is if he's planning to drive back tonight. Fans who've flown from Dublin in Ireland, from Malta in Europe, from Belgium, and one, he wasn't lying to me because I asked him 3 times and I asked him for evidence of the airplane ticket, who flew from Calgary. Somebody flew from Calgary to be here, and he's here for all 3 of the remaining ODIs, so he's here for a full week. Yeah, the passion, the joy and the love of cricket and the pride of, I think it's something that only those who've ever emigrated can understand. The pride of being from the part of the world you're from and representing your nation in another part of the world is so apparent to see and lovely to hear those stories. The one that got me from the World Cup this day last year was the fan that I met, and then I went up to the commentary box to tell Ian Bishop about it, who had sold his car in Australia, in Melbourne, to be there. He said, well, we might not go to another World Cup for another decade, so I'm not missing out on it. I've got a friend in Texas, I'll sleep on his couch. I don't have the money for the ticket, but I'll sell my car. And it's stuff like that. I just gets across the scale of passion for the game in Nepal.
That's an incredible story. I actually remembered reading about that. I think that it might have made it into the press as well.
It was quite funny, actually. I went up to the commentary box at the end of the ninth, 40-1. The television commentary box, that is, in that fantastic Major League stadium. And Bish was off air at the time, and I've been lucky enough to broadcast and work a little bit with Bish. And for all of us in the industry, we all look up to him, kind of Uncle Bish, he's affectionately referred to as by many. And he was saying, Lenny, you always told me Nepal was special, but I never expected it to be quite like this in Texas, of all places. And actually, there's a massive Nepalese community in and around Dallas in particular, and that's why many have not travelled far to be there. But there was, I think that day when I went around the crowd, I counted over 40 states within America that fans had come from, Nepal fans, that is. There was a hardcore of about 100 Dutch fans as well, can't rule them out either. But it was that story that, yeah, as I went round the crowd, ended up randomly with some American police with me for a bit of it, because they were getting scared by the number of photo requests. Bizarre, totally bizarre. But the fan that I spoke to who'd come from Australia, I said, Bish, I've got a great story for you. And he was spellbound. It almost took his breath away when I told him. He said, do you mind if I tell that on air? And I said, mate, I don't mind if you tell it on air. I'd love if you tell it on air, because it helps get across the scale of what we're talking about in terms of love of cricket. And he did it infinitely better than I ever would have. And so well that it did indeed get picked up by many quarters of the press. And that day was particularly intoxicating. It was, I'm pretty sure, a midweek game with, I think it might have been an 11 a.m. local time start, or maybe a 10 a.m. local time start, but there was a cataclysmic thunderstorm that threatened the whole match and ended up with delaying the start by about an hour. And all that meant was there was an extra hour for the Nepal fans to get stuck into the beverages and make it even more of a party affair. I believe they sold out of all concession stalls on the day. It was 7,200, I think, is the capacity of the MLC Stadium in Grand Prairie. It felt a bit more like 30 or 40,000 there that day. Good diving stop and cover point by Lion Cachet as he wrings his hand out with the pain from the cold. But that's what World Cups for me should be all about, Mel.
Yeah.
The story of the Ugandan fans who travelled to Guyana. We saw Papua New Guinea very nearly beat the West Indies on home soil, push them right to the brink. We saw Canada beating Ireland. We saw USA beating Pakistan. That 20-team World Cup was a kind of great step into the unknown, wasn't it? And I think it's here to stay.
I certainly felt for me like the first real World Cup, probably since 2015, the ODI World Cup in Australia and New Zealand. And just to have the variety of fans, the colour. Sometimes you find, I've even found that with Zimbabwe in Australia for the 2022 World Cup, which wasn't as big, but Zimbabwe was there. They got my vote for the fans of that tournament. They were incredible, and you spoke to some of those fans in Australia there from Zimbabwe, and they didn't necessarily weren't even cricket fans. The opportunity to support Zimbabwe was what had drawn them along, and I think, there were some of them who became cricket fans during that World Cup because of it.
It's surely what we want, isn't it? Welcome more people into our game. Again, the gusts really breezing around us. Yeah, there was certainly good performances by the associates. Canada's win over Ireland was a very fine one. USA beating Pakistan via that drama, the super over. But there could have been so many more big upsets, couldn't there? Scotland were all over England like a hot rash.
Oh, they were
Barbados.
Well all over them, but that rain got called off. But Scotland gave Australia a very good game in St Lucia as well.
I describe it as more than that. You're sounding like a true blue Aussie fan for the first time.
I thought it was just at the end.
They had them on the rack. On the absolute rack.
Just at the end.
Stoinis played a once-in-a-lifetime innings. It was almost Maxwell-esque. He made 59 off 29. Yeah, they were right up against it. Glenn Maxwell dismissed in the 9th over. They needed over 2 a ball at one stage.
Yeah, it was just that annoying Australian ability to find someone to produce that kind of innings. But Brandon McMullen, he was brilliant that day. They'd followed up. They had a fantastic win against Namibia, Scotland, and they'd put them within touching distance of the Super 8s. And gosh, if they'd managed to get over the line against Australia, that would have really turned things on its head.
Typically, as we often see it, you think back to that 2015 World Cup, quite often the associate v associate game
Yes, are the closest
are
ones.
the best games
Yes.
in the tournament. So you think about Scotland, Afghanistan down in Dunedin in 2015. Shapur Zadran, who could barely hold a bat, hitting, who was he with? Samuel Shinwari, wasn't it? Sprawling out across the turf as robbed Scotland of what would have been their first ever World Cup win. Papua New Guinea, Uganda last year. The Super Over, you were probably there, were you, for, was that Oman, Namibia, wasn't it, in Bridgetown in Barbados, as Namibia somehow came back.
That was the first game there. I was there. It's ridiculous. Well, this has always been my argument when people argue against associates being in it. And I really dislike the term minnows. I really just don't like that term.
Nicely bowled by Van Meekeren, beats the outside edge. It's a question I've been asked in several different podcasts, media appearances I've done, stuff like that. Well, why do you call it associate cricket at all? And I think it's a good question. I'm not in any way disparaging the question. I think if you don't call it associate cricket, it doesn't give you something to categorise it as. It doesn't give you something to explain the struggle and the endeavour that the men and the women and the boys and girls in these countries have to go through to try and reach parity on the world stage. You know, for an associate team, any associate team to qualify for any World Cup is a major achievement. Even now, the 20-team World Cup, Zimbabwe missed out in the last qualifier.
Yeah.
They just beaten Pakistan in Perth in the previous World Cup in front of all those fans.
Yeah.
You're talking about. So, for an associate team to get to a World Cup is a massive achievement. And I think there's a brand of associate cricket. I don't think if we brought Steve Smith and Glenn Maxwell here today to Dundee, they'd particularly fancy it. It's tough. You play in different conditions. You can play in very adverse ones like we are today. And every match is cutthroat. Every match has meaning. Every match has context. That's why it's so enthralling. That's why it's so engaging. So that's what associate cricket is. This is whipped away in front to square. Should be at least a couple. He's going to get to the rope. Tejan Idamanuru can only escort it there. Little bit aerial, but Bertel will get a boundary.
And so Bertel just starting to wind up a little bit now. Just take another look at that. It's aerial for a little while, but very, very safe. It's a vacant space. Just timed really well. I've made that point when I've made this argument about not reducing the number of teams. So, pulled away nicely. It won't get to the rope this time. At 2 though. The fact that you went back to that last World Cup that had a decent number of teams in Australia and New Zealand and went through the different results and the matches that involved at least one associate side were the more exciting, closer matches. And there were some massive blowouts that involved 2 of the full member nations, really one-sided matches. So when people say, well, it'll make for, they'll just get smashed or it won't be very exciting, it'll be too one-sided, I just don't think that argument holds water. It can happen to any side.
And in reality, there is the occasional blowout.
Yeah, but there is between 2 full member nations as well.
Absolutely. And, a performance like Oman's that day against England was a bit of a calamity in front of a baying English press pack in Antigua. Bowled it out for 47. That was an Oman team in transition, the end of one era. going into the next. But what people don't remember is that a week prior in Bridgetown, they restricted Australia to 160 on a good surface. In fact, at one stage it looked like they'd restrict them to about 120 or 130, but again, it was a fantastic comeback from Marcus Stoinis, who made 67 off 36, but he was dropped. They were in big trouble in that game, really were. Aki Bilias took one of the catches, the greatest catches in World Cup history, off Mehran Khan, sprawling at extra cover. Very reminiscent of the Zishan Maksud one of Paul Sterling in the T20 World Cup in Dharamshala in 2016. So, again, the problem, I think, with some of the associate performances, and I'm saying this as an associate fan, is that it only matters if they win.
Yeah.
And that's the horrible thing. But it's also the reality. Because